Quick heads up, this story gets graphic and disturbing. Viewer discretion advised.
So this is one of those stories that sounds absolutely unreal, but every detail of it is the horrifying truth. We're going to tell the full story of 8-year-old Jennifer, who agreed to sleep in her room for just one night and woke up in a total nightmare. But the scariest part isn't the abduction itself. It's what the monster did to her, thinking that she would never, ever be able to tell anyone about it. And you absolutely have to watch until the end, because that's where we'll reveal an incredible detail. The one clue that this 8-year-old girl managed to remember, and which helped put him behind bars 19 years later. Hey everyone, this is Dwight and Abby Vane. So write down what city you're from, what time is it where you are, and what's the weather like. If you feel like you want to support us, then subscribe to the channel and like this video. And also, tell us, were you ever afraid of the dark when you were a kid? Okay, let's get started.
I know that I, for example, was terrified of sleeping in the dark when I was little because it always seemed like I saw something or heard something. You know, all that classic kid stuff, monsters under the bed and all that. Well, 8-year-old Jennifer Shute was no exception in that regard. She wasn't some unique kid, just a normal girl, and she always had a lot of trouble falling asleep on her own, in her own room. So often, actually, more often than not, she would just go sleep with her mom. She felt safe there, you know, to get that extra comfort that only a grown-up's presence can give. Totally normal behavior for a kid. However, on one specific summer night, this happened in August 1990, her mom asked Jennifer if she could sleep by herself tonight in her own bed. The mom's motivation was completely understandable. She just wanted to get a good night's sleep before work and be ready for the early morning the next day. No bad intentions, just exhaustion. And Jennifer, like an 8-year-old kid already feeling grown up, said, "Sure, Mom, no problem, okay." And really, it seemed like a totally simple, everyday request, right? I mean, what could possibly go wrong in your own house? But the next morning, when Jennifer's mom, as usual, went into her daughter's room to wake her up, Jennifer wasn't in the bed was empty, and the window in the child's room was wide open. And this is the moment when any parent's heart just drops into their stomach. The story of what actually happened to Jennifer Shute that night isn't just heartbreaking. It's honestly totally horrifying. It's one of those cases that makes you rethink your view on safety, but I want you to know you should definitely stay until the very end of this case. Because the finale of this story, it's not at all what you expect.
Jennifer Shute was 8 years old.
Am I scaring you, little girl? Am I scaring you?
It was the break in the cold case police in Dickinson, Texas needed.
How did he target her? Just by chance?
That we don't know.
So, August 1990, Jennifer Shute was, well, a totally typical 8-year-old girl. What does typical mean? It means she was like millions of other kids with her little joys and fears. She had dark hair, had those, little wavy strands with a tiny bang. She also, of course, was missing a tooth in her smile. That same age when baby teeth fall out and it looks both funny and cute. And it, as they say, perfectly matched her cheerful, funny little personality, but her biggest, most noticeable feature were her big round blue eyes. The narrator says they were so bright. Eyes that seemed to reflect the whole sky. They were just, well, so beautiful. It's important to fix this image. It's the image of absolute innocence. Jennifer and her mother, Elaine, lived in the town of Dickinson, Texas, in an apartment complex called Yorktown Apartments. This isn't some elite neighborhood, just regular apartments. They lived in apartment number 49. And here's a critical detail to remember for later. This apartment, as it happened, was on the first floor, the most accessible floor, the most vulnerable. From the moment Jennifer was born, it was always just her and her mom, Elaine. They were a team. A small family of 2, Elaine was a single mother from Jennifer's birth, and we understand what that means. It means she always worked very, very hard to give her daughter a stable, happy, and comfortable life. She handled everything herself and the Yorktown Apartments where they lived. They were located, let's say, not in the best neighborhood of Dickinson. It wasn't the ghetto, but it wasn't a quiet, rich suburb with white picket fences. It was a compromise, however. And here's the reason why they lived there. This complex was located right next to the elementary school. Jennifer attended. For a single mother, this is a deciding factor: convenience and logistics. She had just finished 2nd grade, 8 years old, 2nd grade. It all adds up. Her summer vacation had started, and although she, as they say, genuinely loved school, was a curious child. She, of course, was looking forward to this summer vacation, looking forward to time spent with her mom and friends, like any kid. And so, on that very August night, it was especially hot, Texas, August. We can imagine this humidity. Jennifer, as we remember, often slept with her mom. But that night, she just couldn't get comfortable, couldn't sit still. She was hot, she was tossing and turning. She kept kicking her feet out of the sheets, moving. And because of this, of course, she woke up her mom literally every few minutes, and her hardworking mom just couldn't fall asleep. So her mom, Elaine, finally couldn't take it and asked her, "Hey, Jennifer, can you sleep by yourself in your bedroom, but just for tonight?" And she explained the reason, perfectly logical. "Because I have to get up early for work, and it's critical for me to get at least some rest." Again, no bad intentions, just an exhausted mother. So Jennifer, as a grown-up 8-year-old, said, "Yes, of course, Mom, it's not a problem." She wanted to help her mom. So she went to her bedroom, and what's the first thing she does? Remembering her childhood fears of the dark. She turned on a lamp, and this wasn't just a small nightlight. It turned out to be a lamp in the shape of a huge light bulb. And it just flooded the entire room with light. She made it so there wasn't a single dark spot left. Not one dark corner. And so, in this bright light, she tried to get settled again, to fall asleep. But, as we understand, light is one thing, and a feeling of safety is another. It was still hard for her to fall asleep again. She tossed and turned, and probably listened to every sound in the first floor apartment. So, first she took some money out of her piggy bank. Kid treasures. And started counting it, just to occupy her brain that was afraid of the dark. And then she grabbed a few books to just start flipping through the pages, hoping to tire herself out that way. You know, trying to read herself to sleep well. And at some point, somewhere between the pages of those books, she finally fell asleep, right there, in her room, under the bright lamp that was supposed to protect her.
And then, a few hours later, she woke up. But this wasn't a normal, calm awakening. It was one of those horrible, sticky moments when you slowly surface from sleep. You're not yet sure if you're still sleeping. You're not sure if this is reality or just an especially creepy nightmare, that paralyzing state between sleep and reality. And when she woke up, started to realize it. She noticed that someone's arms were holding her tightly, and they weren't her mom's arms. And when she was finally able to open her eyes to focus her gaze, she noticed it was a man, and that he wasn't just standing, he was running. He was running with her in his arms down the sidewalk, moving quickly away from her apartment complex. Jennifer still wasn't completely sure if what she was experiencing was real. Her child's brain just refused to accept this picture, but when her body reacted before her mind, and she tried to instinctively scream, the man instantly covered her mouth with his huge, rough hand. So Jennifer was completely bewildered by this. It was total cognitive dissonance. She didn't understand how 1 minute she was sleeping in her bed under the lamp, and the next she was waking up outside with this police officer, and they were just running away. It made absolutely no logical sense to her. However, on the other hand, she also knew she was taught this in school. Her mom told her that police officers exist to help. They are there to ensure your safety and this deep childhood trust and authority. It worked. So at that specific moment, strangely enough, she didn't feel immediate danger and even started to calm down a bit. Trust in the word police officer overrode her self-preservation instinct. Still stunned, Jennifer wasn't sure how far the man had managed to run with her, but it wasn't long. Just a moment later, he quickly pulled her into a parked car. And this is where the weirdness starts, which is much harder to ignore. Even for a child, although he said he was an officer, Jennifer, of course, felt very awkward about the whole situation, especially because instead of putting her in the back seat like a witness, or at least in the passenger seat, this man sat Jennifer on his lap. Just imagine this picture. She is squeezed onto his lap in the driver's seat, and he's wrapping his arms around her while also trying to hold the steering wheel. It's so wild and wrong that even a child understands it. And every time they drove, passing other cars, he would sharply push her head down so she couldn't be seen from the side. So even at her 8 years, despite all her naivety, Jennifer already knew clearly a real police officer would never do this. This was totally wrong. While they were driving, the man, obviously sensing her tension, again told Jennifer to calm down and that everything would be okay. And he gave her an explanation. He told her he was working undercover. And this surprisingly worked again. It was logical. Because now she understood why he wasn't wearing a police uniform, he found the perfect excuse for his strange behavior and scruffy appearance. Soon the man stopped the car. They stopped in a dark parking lot that, as it turned out, was painfully familiar to Jennifer. This wasn't just some random parking lot. It was actually her elementary school, a place that should be associated with absolute safety. And right here, in the dim light of the parking lot, lanterns, when they parked, Jennifer was finally able to get a good look at him. She noticed that this man looked very exhausted, also very greasy, and just sort of dirty, disgusting, and vile. The smell, the look, everything was wrong. It was nothing like what you'd normally expect from a police officer. And at this point, it doesn't matter if he's undercover or not.
So after this, after she saw his real disgusting appearance, she started to get even more nervous. Her instincts were just screaming. He obviously noticed this. Because to reassure her again that everything was fine, he used another manipulation. He said that by sunrise, her mom would come for her. He dragged her mom into this story to buy himself time. But still, nothing made sense. Why would mom come here to the school parking lot in the middle of the night? Why did he take her? He told Jennifer to just look at the moon. Look at the moon and just try to calm down. And also, trying to be nice, he asked her if she wanted candy. What, seriously, could be more cliche? A creepy stranger in a car in the middle of the night asks a little girl if she wants candy. Like, seriously, give me a break. But apparently, this cliche exists for a reason. It's so ingrained in safety culture. Because something about that question, it worked like a loud trigger. It switched something on in Jennifer's head. She instantly remembered. She remembered countless school lessons, all those lectures from teachers and police officers about never, under any circumstances, taking candy from strangers. So she firmly refused, and it was at this moment, after the stupid question about candy, that she decided she made a completely conscious adult decision to start making mental notes about everything that was happening in the car, just in case something very bad happened. And this is where we need to stop for a second and realize the very fact that an 8-year-old child in such an absolutely wild, incomprehensible, stressful situation is thinking not about panic, but about collecting evidence, about analyzing her surroundings. This just shows that Jennifer wasn't just smart, she was incredibly smart and composed. She instinctively switched into survival mode. So, as they are sitting in this dark parking lot of her own school, this greasy, dirty man started drinking beer and smoking cigarettes right in front of her. Again, this was such an obvious sign. Such a fat red flag. This is something a police officer, even the most undercover, would not do, especially not in front of a child he is supposedly saving. So, Jennifer finally knew that a person trying to help her doesn't act like this. And strangely enough, he didn't even try to explain to her why it was necessary to take her in the first place. He just kidnapped her, and that was it. She had just seen her mom in the other room, and everything was perfectly fine, which only made this whole situation even more surreal and confusing for her. Jennifer completely, totally lost control of this whole situation. She was trapped, but the only thing she could control was her own mind, and she focused on trying to remember, to imprint in her memory any details she possibly could. She turned into a little tape recorder. She noticed the exact brand of beer he was drinking. She noticed the logo on his pack of cigarettes. She noticed the specific smell in the car. A disgusting mix of beer, sweat, and cigarette smoke. She also noticed the color and exact design of his shirt. She noticed the pattern of hair on his face, where there was stubble and where a beard began. I mean, literally everything she could notice and mentally note. She did it. She was methodically building a file in her head. Jennifer and this man sat in this hot, stuffy car for what felt like an eternity. But it was still completely dark outside, and instead of waiting for the promised sunrise and the imaginary arrival of mom, the man eventually just threw out the line, "Well, your mom's not coming," just like that. Then he started the car and drove out of the school parking lot. So it was at this exact moment when the last false hope of her mom disappeared. Jennifer finally understood that something terribly dangerous was happening and that this would probably end very, very badly. But despite all this, despite this animalistic terror growing inside, at 8 years old, she tried to stay as calm as possible. She understood that panic definitely wouldn't help her. They drove only a few blocks from the school before the man turned off the asphalt onto a dark, unknown gravel road. Then he drove until he ended up in a complete dead end of the road. and impenetrable darkness all around.
Again, they just sat in this darkness, in this gravel dead end, and it seemed like the man was thinking hard, maybe hesitating whether he was actually going to follow through with his plan or not. But Jennifer, this incredible 8-year-old child, decided she wasn't just going to wait silently. She decided she wanted to ask a few more questions. She continued her amazing tactic of gathering information, trying to understand who he was. So she asked him, using his own false legend against him, if he's a police officer, then why doesn't he have either a badge or a gun? These are basic attributes. And he, without even thinking, fed her another lie. Just as absurd as the offer of candy, he answered her that his gun, it was, you see, so big, so special, that he was forced to keep it all the way in the back seat. Seriously. So big that it doesn't fit in a standard holster or in the glove box. And right here, Jennifer, in her childish but absolutely ironclad logic, said she wanted to see for herself. She wanted to see this lie with her own eyes. So she stood up on the passenger seat, turned to face the back seat, and then looked around and started peering in there to see what she could find. She was looking for proof that he was lying. And this was the moment, the same fatal second, when her attention was diverted. That's when everything changed. Instantly, the good cop game was over. Suddenly, the man pulled out not some giant gun. He pulled out an ordinary pocket knife and put it right to Jennifer's throat. It seemed that all this strange waiting in the parking lot, this whole trip to nowhere, it was just some internal preparation for him. He was just getting psyched up, and the moment she turned away, he just couldn't resist. He could no longer hold back his true nature. He was ready to carry out his real, horrible plan. Then, in the coldest and angriest voice imaginable, a voice that was no longer pretending, the man said to Jennifer, "Am I scaring you, girl?" And it wasn't a question, it was a statement. Jennifer, of course, was in such shock that she wasn't even able to answer. And this silent panic of hers just showed that he was definitely scaring her. And it seems that's exactly what he wanted. He needed this fear from her. Let's be realistic. Jennifer weighed only about 20 kilograms. 20. That's the weight of an average vacation suitcase, except, again, analyze everything and try to remember every detail she possibly can. The last thing she remembered was the man.
He just turned around and calmly walked away. A few seconds later, Jennifer heard the sound she had been waiting for with bated breath. She heard his car door slam shut, and then the sound of gravel under the wheels as he drives away. She waited a little longer, making sure he was really gone. And when she realized he was definitely gone, that the immediate threat was over. Jennifer tried to do what any person in her place would do. She tried to scream for help. She hoped that maybe there were houses nearby, that someone would hear her and come and save her. However, for some horrible, incomprehensible reason, when she tried to scream, when she tried to make even a sound, no sound came out of her mouth. Absolutely nothing. Just a quiet, hoarse whistle of air.
Somewhere in the distance, not that far away, Jennifer could clearly hear children playing. She heard laughter, screams, normal life. And honestly, it must have been incredibly painful for her to know that there were people, there was rescue so close, but they just couldn't see her or know that she needed help. However, meanwhile, back at the Yorktown apartments, there were already plenty of people who definitely knew she needed help. And her mother, Elaine, was in absolute uncontrollable terror because when she woke up that morning early for her job, Elaine, as usual, went to check on Jennifer, and she found the very scene that every parent dreads seeing. The window in her daughter's room was wide open. And Jennifer wasn't in the bed.
Sometime early Friday morning, 8-year-old Jennifer Schuett was abducted from her apartment bedroom.
Jennifer's mother entered the bedroom and found the bedroom window open and her daughter gone.
When Jennifer, there was no sign of her, she was just gone.
Jennifer graduated from high school. Imagine that for a second. How can you even graduate high school when you have a memory like that in your head? She started a career. And eventually, what seems just incredible, she fell in love with a man named Jonathan Martinez. She was able to trust. She was able to build a new life, literally on the ruins that monster left behind. But Jennifer never, not for one day, lost hope that one day her kidnapper would be found and held responsible. Because giving up would mean letting him win a second time. But now, after so many years had passed, it seemed like everyone but her had started to get distracted from the case. It turned into a cold case, a dead end, which, essentially was considered unsolved. No one was actively working on it anymore. The papers were just collecting dust in an archive. There were no solid clues, no new leads. This went on until Jennifer got a phone call, a call from a very specific detective, Tim Cromer. He called Jennifer in January 2008, that is 18 years after the attack, and told her that he was officially taking over the investigation of her case. Jennifer's case had been chosen for review, and not just by anyone, but by a special agent from the Houston FBI, a man named Richard Renison, and that same Dickinson police detective, Tim Cromer. Why such sudden interest? Because the FBI had launched a new program, a program to identify child abduction cases that had gone cold, and that, most importantly, could potentially be retested for DNA evidence with new technology. And out of all the unsolved cases, Jennifer's case was the one that struck Agent Renison. Jennifer's case was selected for further investigation and retesting for DNA evidence, and Tim Cromer told her, and these are the exact words she had been waiting 18 years for. He said he would do everything possible to find the answer she needed. Even if it took the rest of his career, he gave her his word. Years had passed since anyone else was as passionate as Jennifer herself about solving her case, and she felt that these two, Tim Cromer and Richard Renison, truly wanted to help her get justice. So the two investigators started by literally going down to the basement. They started by revisiting the evidence room, where all the items from Jennifer's case were stored. Over the years, there had been insane progress in DNA testing, and although in 1990 there was insufficient biological material, now, in 2008, there was a high probability that a full DNA profile could be extracted from that same clothing found near the scene. But since the case was 18 years old, they worried what condition that evidence was in. However, they also knew that the lab had more important, more urgent tests to run, which would be given priority. Old cases always go to the back of the line, so it took almost a whole year of waiting after 18 years of waiting, for any data to appear. This now marked 19 years since the attack, but then, shockingly, the lab was able to find a match, not just isolate DNA, but find a match between the DNA on the clothing and the DNA of a man that had been entered into the CODIS system. For those not familiar, CODIS is the national DNA database, and information about people and their DNA is entered there if they have already committed some crime. This meant one thing: their monster wasn't a ghost. He was in the system. He had done something else and gotten caught. The fact that they now had this match was a huge tectonic step forward in the investigation, but the agents were absolutely surprised when they were told the name, whose name exactly matched the DNA, if you remember. The DNA test turned out to belong to a man named Dennis Earl Bradford.
This was pretty confusing, as this man had never appeared on their radar during the initial investigation, but when they found a photo of this man from an ID, they were shocked again. They were shocked to see that this photo was a practically perfect match to the sketch, the same sketch that Jennifer had provided. Based on her memories, it seemed as if the artist who drew that sketch 19 years ago was looking at a real photo of Dennis Bradford while finishing her drawing. This was a colossal breakthrough, and now the two agents were about to find out why Dennis was even in that CODIS system in the first place. And along with this, they also discovered something horrifying. Dennis Earl Bradford was born on September 28, 1969, and in 1990, when the attack on Jennifer happened, he would have been 20 years old, just 20. I couldn't find any information about Dennis's early life, but by all accounts, from reviews, he seemed like a normal, nice guy. It's such a classic. Neighbors who were close to Dennis said he was the kind of person who would help with anything at any time of day. Shirt off his back guy, life of the party. Dennis and Lisa got married, and they had children, a son and a daughter. He was living a normal life, raising his own kids, thinking he had killed someone else's child. According to Lisa, Dennis was a loving husband and a loving father, a perfect marriage, right? But obviously, eventually he had trouble holding a job and took on the role of a stay-at-home dad, or as he put it, Mr. Mom. Maybe this wouldn't have been a bad situation, but Lisa started to notice that Dennis began to show strange behavior. And suddenly it seemed like only one thing mattered to him: booze. He started drinking hard, or maybe he was just trying to use alcohol to overcome that same dark desire, the desire to kill again. I'm personally betting on the second one. Regardless, his alcohol abuse eventually led to Lisa filing for divorce. By 1996, Dennis was again spending more and more time in the local bars of Hot Springs, and that's where he met another woman. Very similar to how he met Lisa a few years earlier, he was repeating the script. Dennis offered to buy the woman a drink, and they, as they say, talked and played pool until the end of the night. He was charming, the nice guy. Finally, after the last call at the bar, Dennis offered to drive her home. And this woman agreed. Just like Jennifer, this woman miraculously survived the attack. So Dennis, of course, was arrested. He was charged with attempted first-degree murder. It seemed like this was it, the end. However, his charges were later reduced. And you know why? Apparently, since the woman accepted his drink at the bar and voluntarily got into his car, the prosecutors decided that they just couldn't be sure if this is just a circus. But in the end, he was convicted only of kidnapping, and in 1997, sentenced to 12 years in prison. Seems long. However, Dennis was released in February 2000, having served only 3 years. 3 years for kidnapping and attempted murder, but, and here it is, that key moment. Before they let him go, his DNA was entered into the CODIS database. It was a time bomb, waiting 10 years for its moment. From there, after getting out, Dennis moved to Little Rock, Arkansas. And in 2004, what does he do? That's right. He got married again to a woman named Elizabeth Weber. He also became a stepfather to her 3 children. He was building the facade of a perfect family again. Dennis got a job as a welder, and his boss said he was a reliable and very hardworking employee. At this point, they say, he wasn't drinking anymore. He had put the mask back on, and with such a flawless family man image, if a sheriff's deputy hadn't stumbled upon Dennis's car on this dark, dead-end street, completely by accident, which ironically was called Quiet Street, Dennis was eventually charged with, but at the same time, the investigators working on Jennifer Schuett's case, who already had the DNA match, began to focus on him as their prime suspect. When Agent Renison and Detective Cromer started looking into his background, they were confused. Why would someone living in Arkansas end up near Jennifer and Elaine's apartment in Dickinson, Texas? 19 years ago, they decided to get information from the Texas Department of Transportation and found an old, dusty traffic violation ticket. And there it was. In the affidavit, they discovered that at the time of Jennifer's abduction, Dennis was actually living in Dickinson. He lived just a few streets away from her apartment. He wasn't a random traveler. He was a neighbor, having enough information to link Dennis to the crime. DNA, the name, the sketch, the location. The district attorney authorized charges for attempted murder. Renison and Cromer headed to Little Rock, where they met up with local law enforcement and waited for Dennis to leave his house. They didn't want to storm the house. They just pulled him over in a routine traffic stop, and then he was arrested on the warrant. After he was in custody, Detective Cromer called Jennifer. He told her about the arrest, and she just couldn't believe it. It had been over 19 years. And although she never lost hope, she had started to think her kidnapper would never be caught, or maybe he was long gone, or even dead, but he was alive, and he was in handcuffs. When Cromer and Renison were finally able to meet with Dennis in the interrogation room, he was, as they say, pretty puzzled about why he was arrested during a simple traffic stop. He probably thought it was because of that. He had no idea that his past, his very first darkest sin from 19 years ago, had just kicked down the door and was sitting right across from him. But the detectives didn't waste any time getting to the point.
You ever heard the name Jennifer Schuett? Yes. Did you ever have occasion to come in contact with her? Yes. Tell me about that. No. Let's hear it. I took that little girl out there and I raped her.
It was obvious that the name Jennifer Schuett, that was the last name Dennis Bradford ever expected to hear in an interrogation room in 2009. I mean, he was probably sitting there, completely calm, thinking it was some mistake, or that this was all related to that last minor arrest for patronizing. But no, they said the name, a name from the past, one that he, without a doubt, thought he had securely buried 19 years ago in that dark, dirty field. But he was even more, not just surprised. He was fundamentally, totally shocked when they told him the next detail, when they told him that Jennifer was still alive. that the job done turned out to be not done, that the ghost he left to die turned out to be real, and this ghost, she remembered everything.
My whole life for the past 20 years has been utterly and completely. I can tell, obviously, this affects you a lot, but I think you would, if you were to see her, I think you would be extremely proud of her. I really do. Oh, thank you. She's alive.
Yes, she's alive.
She's alive.
She's alive. Let me tell you, she is a incredible young woman.
Oh, God. Oh, God. Well, you have no idea how hard I have prayed for that. I'm a firm believer of Christ. But I had no idea. Because it wasn't but about 2 days later I ran. And I just took off.
And honestly, this surprises me too. Like, for real. After all that media coverage, right after Jennifer's kidnapping, how could Dennis not have heard that she survived? I mean, he lived, damn it, just a few streets away. Did he just run away, hide in his shell, and never read the local news? That sounds really weird. Or, what's much, much more likely, he really knew. Of course he knew. And he just wanted to fake this shocked surprise. And maybe even some phony relief that he, you see, didn't actually kill her. So yeah, Dennis confessed to what he did, but he left out the key parts. He didn't explain how he even knew about Jennifer in the first place. Like, was it random or was he actively stalking her? And he didn't say how the hell he managed to open her window so easily to just walk in and snatch her from her own bedroom that night. He kept those crucial details to himself. The investigators, of course, pressed him. They told Dennis he owed Jennifer closure, the same closure she'd been waiting 19 long years for, and he needed to give it to her by finally being completely honest about everything that happened. And so he dished out this classic theatrical confession. He said, "Not a day goes by that I don't see this child." He added, "There is no other side to this story. She was innocent, and I." And right here, he gave himself a pretty accurate description.
Thing to say to Jennifer Sherwood, Dennis? We got the confession, and he filled in a lot of the blanks. And to confirm a lot of what she remembered happened made her feel better about always wanting to remember.
All right, so after Dennis Bradford finally broke down and confessed, after he called himself a sick, crazy punk, he was, of course, immediately transferred. He was extradited to the Galveston County Jail. And this is an important point. This is in Texas, not Arkansas, where they found him. He was brought back right where he committed this horrific crime. So he could finally face trial on the same soil where he left. And right then, Detective Cromer, the same man who promised Jennifer he'd find him, FBI agent Renison, and most importantly, Jennifer herself, they went out and held a joint press conference. I'm just trying to imagine this moment. Her face as she stood there, they came out to officially announce, not just a suspicion, but an arrest and a confession. They announced to the world that they had arrested the man for that same horrific kidnapping that happened almost 2 decades ago. 19 years, the case that everyone considered cold, that was buried in an archive, had just been solved.
Above all, I'd like to thank Detective Tim Coney with the Dickinson Police Department and Special Agent Richard Renison with the FBI for all of their hard work and dedication over the last year and a half, and for his promise from day one, never giving up on my case, and for hearing my voice and seeing my determination. I was so overwhelmed at the press conference, And then Detective Crummy and Agent Renison came into the room and hugged me and whispered in my ear, "We told you we'd get him." At the time, that was the single most amazing moment of my life.
Now, of course, it's just impossible to describe the level of relief Jennifer felt. 19 years of waiting. It's just impossible to comprehend. And she would finally be able to do the one thing she wanted from the very moment she woke up in the hospital with. She wanted to meet Dennis face to face, not just see his picture in the news. She wanted to look him right in the eyes. She wanted to talk to him. She wanted to explain to him, not the police, not reporters, but him, what he did to her, what she feels, and that her life, because of him, would never, ever be the same again. She wanted to make him hear it from her personally. And what's probably most important, she also wanted to meet him face to face, to tell him straight to his face that she was the one who helped solve her own case, that it was her memory, her child's mind, her incredible details. They are what caught him after 19 years. Now, regarding the consequences, if Dennis was found guilty in Texas, which is where he was supposed to be tried, he faced the death penalty, the highest form of punishment. And Jennifer was told that preparing for such a complex, high-profile trial would take about a year. This meant the trial, it would happen exactly 20 years after her attack, almost to the day.
Well, Dennis Earl Bradford was in the county jail awaiting trial. I get a phone call in the middle of the night. "Tim, I need to talk to you. You need to wake up. I've got some news to give you."
However, in another, and probably the most vile, and certainly the most cowardly move of his pathetic life, Dennis Bradford robbed her of that chance. He took away her final punctuation, that catharsis she had waited 2 decades for. 6 months into his jail stay, awaiting trial. Dennis was found dead in his cell. He couldn't do it. He couldn't sit in the same room with the woman he failed to kill when she was a child. He knew she won, and he just couldn't take it. This happened on May 10th, 2010. He took the easy way out. No trial, no cross-examination, and even though Jennifer couldn't read Dennis that statement she had prepared, one she probably rehearsed for 19 years, and couldn't say it to his face, she didn't give up. After his family held the funeral, her fiancé, Jonathan, drove her to the cemetery where this monster had just been buried. It might seem strange, but she had to do it. She wanted to make sure Dennis heard what she had to say, even if it was from the other side, and hear a totally surreal moment. So as Jennifer sat by his freshly covered grave, and even before she could start reading her speech, she felt that same, painfully familiar, burning bite of a fire ant on her leg. Not a bee, not a mosquito, but a fire ant, the same insect that kept her from dying. Jennifer took it as a sign. It was like a full circle moment, closing right there on his grave. A sign that the same forces that kept her from dying in that field 19 years ago would now make sure Dennis heard her loud and clear, and although Jennifer didn't get the exact courtroom justice she had hoped for all those years, she still felt peace. She knew that Dennis Bradford would never, and she started to speak. She became a motivational speaker. She started encouraging other victims of violent crimes to use their voice. The same voice Dennis tried so hard, but ultimately failed to take from her, although it took Jennifer a long time to recover from everything she went through. The support from Jonathan, her family, Detective Cromer, and Agent Renison, all of it helped her become a stronger person, to become an inspiration for people who went through similar horrible situations. She gave people with other old, unsolved cases hope. Hope that even after decades, more and more old cases are being solved, thanks to advances in DNA analysis. After Jennifer and Jonathan got married, they, of course, decided it was time to start their own family. However, Dennis, this monster, again, for one last time, almost destroyed this aspect of her life. Even while being dead, this was his last gift from the grave. They believed Jennifer was likely infertile and would probably never be able to conceive her own children. It seemed like he, even dead, was still taking swings at her, trying to take away her future, trying to take away her chance at motherhood. But when a reproductive therapist heard about Jennifer's situation, heard her whole story, what happened to her, he was so moved that he donated almost $20,000 for Jennifer's fertility treatments. He gave her a chance to fulfill her dream of becoming a mother. And just like doctors once thought Jennifer would never speak again, now they thought she would never have a child. The medical prognoses were against her, but this woman, she seems to be made of some different, unbreakable material. She proved them wrong again. She beat all those medical predictions. She overcame all the difficulties and got pregnant. She gave birth to a little girl, and after that, she and Jonathan had a second child, a little boy. And it finally completed their family. She won. She beat him biologically, psychologically, and physically for good.
The story of what happened to Jennifer, this is perhaps one of the most inspiring stories of resilience, faith, determination, and strength that I've ever heard the vast majority of cases that we cover here. Let's be honest, they don't have happy endings. And although Jennifer never got to look Dennis in the eye in a courtroom, and I'm of course curious to know what you guys think about this case, I truly can't imagine anything more terrifying than having your child abducted from the safety of their own bed in the middle of the night. And you wake up to find their bedroom empty and the window open. As a parent, it just makes me physically sick. And it's probably one of the most horrifying experiences anyone could ever go through. And with Dennis, this is just another one of those classic, disturbing examples of a man living a double life. At home, he was the good father, the family man, the loving husband, the hardworking employee, the nice neighbor, all of this hypocritical dirt. This is a person you'd trust to hold your keys while you're on vacation. But behind closed doors, when you pull back that curtain, he was a greasy, disgusting, drinking. So Jennifer would have the chance to speak in court, especially considering how much evidence there was against Dennis, plus his own confession. But in the end, the world is a little safer now that Dennis is gone, and now Jennifer can live a happy life with her husband and kids. They earned it.
A sound came out, and it was just like the world stopped for a moment. I proved everyone wrong. I like to say I haven't shut up since.
Thank you for watching, everyone. This was Dwight and Abby. Jennifer's story is just incredible proof that the human spirit and the will to live are so much stronger than we can possibly imagine. But we have to ask you, tell us honestly, what shocked you more, Dennis Bradford himself or the Arkansas justice system? The system that let him go after only 3 years for attacking another woman with a knife just because she supposedly accepted a drink from him. Is there any way to possibly justify that kind of failure? And let us know what you think. We want to express our absolute and deepest respect for Jennifer Shute. She is a true warrior. Also, please check out the next videos you see on the screen right now. And believe us, we worked just as hard on those. So we're not even saying goodbye. We'll see you over there.